I didn't know I had OCD until it was 2021 that I was diagnosed. I went through bouts of stress and anxiety, like to the point where I couldn't eat for days or I couldn't
Mhm.
sleep, but I never had a specific name for it. May 2020, my mom was diagnosed with two cancers. Not only was I a nervous wreck already because of the state of the world and COVID, on top of that, my mom being sick was it just like it opened the floodgates. I decided after I got diagnosed, I was like, I cannot talk about this ever online. And then once I realized that there's not enough content online for people who have OCD or like the actual things that I was struggling with and how taboo it all felt, I was like, oh, I could really do something with this. Like I could really reach out to people who have been going through this. And I wish that I had just one YouTuber who was open and honest in a sense about what they were going through so that I did not feel so lonely.
Hello, and welcome once again to another episode of the Get to Know OCD podcast. If you like the work that we do, you can check us out on our NOCD YouTube channel. And if you're looking for help for OCD or related conditions, go to nocd.com. I am excited today to have Nicole Rafiee here. How are you?
Hi, good to see you. Nice to see you.
Well, thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're only famous on YouTube or anything like that.
Right.
Come on.
I know.
You've kind of grown up on the internet.
I know, I really did. I really did. I think about that sometimes. I'm like, how different my life would have been had I been, had more computer restricted access.
Or if you grew up like me and we didn't have computer.
Exactly.
Well, tell everyone a little bit about you and what you do, and then we'll get into why we're here today.
Yeah. So I started making YouTube videos when I was a kid. I grew up in the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania, and I just always was infatuated with YouTube, and the computer in our basement was the downfall of everything. I mean, really like every child's desktop computer down in the basement. But I just quickly became obsessed with mainly like teenage YouTubers who were like just being creative and doing their own thing. It was a lot of like creative videos, like stop motion-esque videos or like music videos or skits and bits. And I just always wanted to do something like that. But I was like 8 years old and I should not have been doing something like that. But, of course, like stealing my parents' camcorder and figuring out how to do things. And eventually I just started making content. Stopped quite a few times because people would find out my content and I was like so deeply embarrassed, which is so funny because now that's like my whole point is for people to find it and like my wish.
Yes.
And so I just started again and started to take it seriously in my sophomore year of college at Temple University, where I was studying like a slew of different things because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I was like originally for like sociology, then psychology, and then public health and kinesiology, and then I ended up in media studies and production because I just loved.
Why?
No, truly, why?
Yeah.
I just loved what I was doing so much, and I just hated sitting in class doing anything else, and all I could think about is going back to my dorm room and making content. And I loved it so much. And even though it was embarrassing, I was an RA at the time. And so for my residents on my floor to like find my videos and they're like, I saw your weird video that you made in your dorm, or like they could hear me through the walls. Very embarrassing, but it all paid off because it was ultimately like what I really, really wanted to do. And I was mainly like a college content creator at the time, but then kind of strived to shift away from that, especially after graduating and spent some time home, especially after COVID. I moved back home, completed college, graduated from literally my kitchen, and I'm a full-time YouTuber since then. And so that has been my main gig, and I have been absolutely loving it. And so now my content is mainly around like pop culture, media that I've been loving, basically the things that I am in love with and obsessed with, but not in an OCD way.
There we go. Yeah. And a lot of that is your mental health work.
A lot of it, yeah, definitely.
If people aren't aware, can you walk us through kind of the genesis of that and the beginnings of where that came in?
Yeah. No, I didn't know I had OCD until it was 2021 that I was diagnosed. I always knew that I was anxious and I was like an anxious kid, and my mom always knew that. Like in Polish, like you would just the word is like nervova. And so like my mom would just always be like, oh my God, this child is so nervova. And like I was like the epitome of that. But, I went through bouts of stress and anxiety, like to the point where I couldn't eat for days or I couldn't
Mhm.
sleep. And like it was all these manifestations, like these physical manifestations of this anxiety that I was holding in, but I never had a specific name for it.
Sure.
And throughout the years, I thought that I was well versed in mental health because, I was watching YouTube a lot. And like on YouTube, primarily, as time went on, people were more comfortable talking about their mental health. And it seemed like more and more people were coming forth and talking about having depression and having anxiety. And I was like, okay, like I can relate to this, but I never truly found somebody who was like speaking my language and like I totally vibed and connected with and like was what I was experiencing. And it wasn't until I came home from COVID, that was March 2020, May 2020, my mom was diagnosed with two cancers. She was diagnosed with endometrial cancer and breast cancer
Mm.
at the same time. And that, not only was I a nervous wreck already because of the state of the world and COVID, and I really did not handle it well. I don't think anybody was handling it well, but I exceptionally like just was not handling it like the average person was. And on top of that, my mom being sick was it just like it opened the floodgates. And so, when treatment was over, I became like her primary caretaker throughout that time. And she's great now. She's post chemo, post operations, and
Wonderful.
she's cancer
Good.
free.
Good.
But I was like, oh, I'm like a nervous wreck. Like I still am like that nervous child that I was. But just now I'm like 21 and I feel like I am a wreck and I don't know what is going on with me. And this doesn't feel like normal anxiety. And I was like, I think I'm gonna finally go to see a therapist. And during therapy, like they were like, yeah, you have anxiety or whatever. But I just did not feel like and this was just regular CBT therapy.
General talk therapy work.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Mhm.
And I did not feel like I was progressing at all. And as the weeks were going on in therapy, I didn't feel like anything was like no breakthroughs. And I just remember one day I was like, I'm going to write down every single thing, like everything that I'm experiencing and feeling on this particular day, because this seems like a particularly distressing day for myself. I'm going to write it all down, like block by block, so I can bring this up in therapy. And when I did bring this list of emotions and like my inner monologue to myself, she was like, "Have you ever gotten tested for OCD?" And I was like, "Oh my God, actually, like it's been an inkling in my mind. Like I've thought about it. I've had people in my life tell me before, like, you kind of sound like you might have OCD, like people in my life who did have OCD or do have OCD. But I never considered that I actually really could because I didn't understand the extent of what OCD could be or what it was. And finally got a diagnosis, like went through testing, got a diagnosis, continued with CBT, wasn't seeing much help. Now I'm in ERP and I feel a lot better and also on medication. But um I decided after I got diagnosed, I was like, I cannot talk about this ever online. Like I was like, this is a
Mhm.
secret that's gonna like die with me. Like I'm not telling anybody. I'm telling like a few close people in my life. Like I'm telling my mom, obviously, and like a few friends. I was like, this is not gonna go anywhere because I was so scared of it being used against me, like
Yeah.
so terrified. Um, and then once I realized that there's not enough content online for people who have OCD or like the actual things that I was struggling with and how taboo it all felt, I was like, oh, I could really do something with this. Like I could really reach out to people who have been going through this. And I wish that I had just one YouTuber who like was open and honest in a sense about what they were going through so that I did not feel so alone. Like I thought about how good that could have done for me. But I don't blame anyone for like not wanting to talk about it online, especially with how, you know, taboo it seems and how stigmatized it is. But that's when I started to slowly make content about OCD. I made a video talking about being diagnosed with OCD and how I was struggling with it and how it was really difficult. My process of, trying different medications, how I was really scared to start them,
Mhm.
starting ERP therapy, and then slowly I talked about how OCD was represented in the media because that was something I was really interested in. Um, and I'm very happy that I opened up about it because it just seems like there are so many. It's unfortunate that there's so many more people that are like me. Like whenever I meet
Right.
somebody and if I meet a subscriber and they're like, I have OCD too, I'm like, I'm not happy that you have OCD, but I'm so happy that like we got to connect on this way because that is, I just, that would have done so much for me, I think, like
Yeah.
growing up. And so I'm happy that people have that now that they can watch my content and be like, okay, like she lives what seems to be like a happy life and she is doing what she wants to do in her life and she seems content and she has persevered through this. And it's almost like a little personal diary that you can see from, how tumultuous my life really was. And I mean, you could see it in my content, like how much I was struggling pre-diagnosis, during the diagnosis, post finding out, and like, all the stages. And I think it's a really cool, like personal little diary that I have on there.
That's awesome. A lot to unpack there
I
with,
know, I
with some
know.
things. So thank you for that
Yeah.
history. Uh, one of the things that I agree with is the lack of a great portrayal of OCD
Yeah.
online. And so having something like what you do is really helpful to give a face to it, to show people what it really is
Right.
and who talk about it, and even go into the taboo nature of it because it isn't just washing your hands and
Absolutely.
straightening things. Do you have to fight against a lot of this notion of, oh, I didn't know that was OCD, or people coming up to you almost still kind of, oh, by the way, just, yeah.
Yes. Oh my, yes. My comments I know people are well intentioned, but there
Yeah.
are people who don't know, and I will still get comments being like, "Oh my God, I'm so OCD too," and like these stereotypes of what I think people have just seen in the media, or like they think of like Sheldon from Big Bang Theory, or they think of Monk, and like they just say, I mean, I don't know if people nowadays are like actually watching, Big Bang Theory or Monk, but or people my age, but or younger than me, but yes, I will say that it is still such a sick. I mean, even my family, and like I love my family dearly, and like, but it is, first of all, it is a different time, like from in which they grew up, and especially if you didn't struggle with OCD, you're not going to know like all these signs and symptoms, and so I will still hear comments like, I'm so OCD too. And I'm like, okay, sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
whatever.
There's an interesting cultural piece. I mean, you have a fascinating background. You're half Iranian, half Polish, and grew up Catholic,
Mhm.
right? So you've got a lot there. How much did cultural identity play into there with various backgrounds and systems, faith, culture, all those things? Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up with my mom who's Polish
Mhm.
and Catholic. And so you know, Catholicism is pretty strict.
Yes.
And I'm no longer practicing Catholic, but that I grew up with that, and it was very ingrained in me. Like going to Sunday school, I will say that it did cause a lot of, looking back now, a lot of this strictness and structure around things, where I was always I now recognize where a lot of my obsessions come from. Like
Okay. Yeah.
this whole idea of like, am I a good or bad person? Like
Mhm.
I often feel like I am being reminded of Sunday school constantly.
Mhm.
And it was just one of those things where you didn't ask questions about, your faith. You just kind of like had to, you were brought up this way, and that's just the way that it was, and like you believe in what you believe in, and I had questions, and that was really really difficult for me. And so growing up, I felt like a bad person a lot of the time because I was sitting in church every single Sunday and I was trying to not think of curse words in my head, which would only make me think of curse words even more,
Yeah.
or not think of like sacrilegious thoughts, but then I would think about it even
Yeah.
more.
Don't think of a pink elephant.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so as a kid, like the main thing that I would do, like my earliest memory, I guess, that of my um compulsions as a kid was anytime that I was like in severe distress or like really, really, really terrified and scared, I would pace in my room and like pray to the Pope so much. And like I was just like, oh, like the Pope is gonna save me. Like I don't know why specifically the Pope, but um and just praying was a really, really big thing for me. And it then turned into like when I, got older and kind of lost my faith, it then turned into spirituality. So it just like morphed into like this new thing. And I didn't know I had OCD at the time. So I was like, it was this new thing to obsess over, and like manifestation and positivity. And oh my God, if I manifest or I think of a bad thought, it's then gonna happen. Like it's gonna come to fruition.
Right, right.
So it was just never ending, which now I've gotten to a point where that can't be part of my life at
Yeah.
all. But I will say, I mean, having family that grew up in Poland, and I will say, like, it is a different time. My family
Of
has been
course.
incredibly
Yeah.
supportive, but to be diagnosed with OCD was not something that, was common, especially for, my mom, for example, growing up in the 70s and 80s. Like, that was not something that was of concern. And
No.
it was one of those things where it's like, well, if you pray hard enough, and then maybe that will go away. And thankfully, like, I'm lucky enough that I have a very supportive system around me and my mom, and who are completely on board. But it was a learning curve to like try and teach them and be like, this
Yeah.
isn't something I can pray away.
Right.
And also, like, it is okay to try medication. It is okay to look for therapy. That was a really common thing that people in my family were like, do you really need therapy? Like, you can't put your faith into God, but you're going to put your faith into like a therapist or like a doctor with medication. And that was something that it was a learning curve for like all of us. But I think now, through time and just also showing like how much I have benefited and changed from it. I mean, I was taking a chance by going through with treatment in the first place.
Of course.
And so
Of course. Yeah.
I think it's been a positive learning curve for all of us.
The manifesting piece is
Yeah.
so big. Would you indulge me for a moment in a
Yeah.
little exercise?
Yeah.
Could we wish for the ceiling to collapse on us
Yeah.
for the next 10 seconds
we can
and see
do
what?
that.
All right, let's try.
Okay.
All right, we didn't manifest the ceiling
Right.
collapsing on us,
Yeah.
did we? Thoughts can feel so powerful
Yeah.
to people with OCD.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear your kind of take on that, because one of the things that I hear, two of the things I hear as a therapist. First one is it feels so real.
Mm-hmm.
And the second is just this idea that you can justify anything with the phrase, but it feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. That was something I really, really struggled with. 2019, especially, and 2020. I took a class in media studies with this amazing professor, like he at Temple University. And I mean, he was known to be like wild and like nuts, but like he was like a genius. But he held a class. I don't know why I took this class, but it was about the end of the world represented in media. What possessed me to take this class? I actually think I needed it. I think I needed to do this class to like complete some of my credits or whatever. But I took this class and I developed such bad anxiety over the end of the world. And because I was constantly writing about the end of the world and doing essays on the end of the world and thinking about the end of the world and having anxiety about nuclear attacks and pandemics, my fears when, early 2020 were getting really, really scared about actual nuclear attacks potentially happening with like North Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, a pandemic. Like I was like, I did this. Like my thoughts did this. Like I am responsible for this. Nightmares, that's like a whole other thing. Like I have chronic nightmares. I have like my whole life. So when I have nightmares about the end of the world, and then bad stuff happens, months later, I'm like, how nobody could tell me. Like I was so convinced in myself. Like I was like untouchable. Like I truly believe that I was like an oracle, and that like I joked about it. I joked that I was like the all-knowing and stuff. But like deep down, I really did feel responsible for some of these things. And telling myself, letting myself believe that these small little acts of like good guessing or a coincidence or good intuition, then eventually me allowing myself to do those things because I didn't know I had OCD, then turned into a complete disaster when these large, horrible events were happening in the world. And so I'm so happy that like I was able to come out of that, because that was like probably like why 2020 was so tumultuous. Like I had a nightmare about my mom having breast cancer like many years ago. And so
Sure.
then in 2020, I really believed, I was like, it was because of me. Like, it was because of me that this is now happening. And so then I was trying to figure out any possible way that I could stop the pandemic, stop nuclear war being imminent, and also stop the pandemic, like stop the pandemic and stop my mom's cancer. Like,
Yeah.
there was a lot of stress all at once to be feeling like this grand responsibility and this like weight on my shoulders. It's a lot.
Well, at least now I know who to blame for it.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I know.
The arrest warrant is still out for you.
I know
think,
it
somewhere,
is.
right?
I know.
But we joke, but doesn't it feel that way?
Yeah.
A bit?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
There's a part of that, right?
I always joke about this. And I mean, truly only like my therapist will laugh. And like, I mean, I will only mention this around people with OCD because they will get it. But like, I was born in 1999. I was born September 10th. So I'm telling you, if I was like alive and like a conscious, I was alive, but like if I was conscious, if I was like a 6-year-old,
Yeah.
I genuinely probably would have thought 9/11 was because of me. Like,
Sure.
like I am
Sure.
fully convinced that I would have thought that had I been a little bit more sentient.
Mhm.
And so I'm happy that I got treatment before more world disasters came around because that would have wrecked me.
I hear there's a hurricane coming. Do you have anything to or no?
I haven't seen anything. Like, I haven't seen anything in my crystal ball
Okay,
about that
okay.
recently. So
But there is this notion of
Yeah.
the OCD crystal ball, isn't there?
Absolutely.
I mean, you're not making that up.
No.
People really feel that
Yes.
there's some link, and it doesn't matter if there's 900 steps to it,
Mhm.
as long as there's a link, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, it sounds crazy to anybody else. And like, I would just sit there and I'd be like, I cannot emphasize enough. Like, I just have this feeling, or
There
I
you go.
have this itch, or I just have this, and it'd be the same feeling I get before, like, if you held up your fingers behind your back and said, guess what number I have? And like, if I said 4 and you really did have 4 behind your back, it's that same
Yeah.
feeling. Like, it's a high that you get about being right. Like, you don't want to be right about these horrible things happening, but I would get this high off of any time my intuition or coincidence or my gut feeling or utter chance was correct about something.
Yeah. The other piece that I throw on that, and I love your opinion, is OCD loves the phrase "what if."
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
just like a best friend.
Yeah.
But it's never like, what if everyone loves me and thinks I'm great?
No.
It's only worst case scenarios.
Yeah.
How much of your life has been ruled by what if?
A lot. Oh, a lot of it. What if has been, I think I'm way more concerned about the future and the past more than I am in the present, because I just keep thinking like, what if I could change this? Or what if I had done something differently in the past? It makes it so hard to be present a lot of times. One of the biggest like what ifs for me that really started in 2020, like, I love how OCD will just choose to grasp onto like any random theme, even if it doesn't have any correlation to do with anything else. Like, here I am, paranoid and worried about the end of the world and a pandemic and my mom potentially dying from cancer, and suddenly my brain is like, okay, but what if you were 9 months pregnant right now and you didn't know?
Yeah.
And
you didn't know, being the opportune.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I was like, of course it would happen to me. And that was my huge what if. And like, it sounds ridiculous, but I was 110% convinced that I was constantly pregnant, like all the time, like about to pop any day, like 9 months. And I just didn't know. And so that, I don't know why my brain latched onto that. I have theories because I watched that show. I didn't know I was pregnant as a kid. And so that could have had something to do with it. But that was my biggest what if. And I mean, I still, like, it's gotten so much better, but I still struggle with that. And I always know that my OCD is like creeping, and like, you know, I need to get more sleep, or I need to eat better, or I need to relax a bit more when the sun, like, what if you were pregnant? Like, what if you were really pregnant right now? And that's, I know, but it has controlled my life beyond belief.
Sure. And I've seen people who are afraid, what if I've caused someone to be pregnant,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
What if I sat down in a chair and I left a little deposit there,
Yep.
and someone sat there and then it crawled inside and
Literally.
boom, you know. There is a different logic to OCD, and it is the yeah, but what if logic, which
Yeah.
means, and I think you probably saw this in talk therapy. I'd love you to comment on this, but anytime you were probably doing a talk therapy with someone, I'm going to bet you always had a yeah, but what if to say to them that at some point they couldn't answer anymore. And then
Oh,
you would be like, ah, see, there it is. There's,
I
yeah.
never left talk therapy feeling like I was doing any real progress. I feel like I was being enabled
Yeah.
in a certain sense. And also, I didn't know about ERP at the time. Like, I didn't know about the therapy that probably would help me the most with my OCD. I knew therapy as therapy, and I was going to go to therapy, and this was therapy down the street, and I was going to go here. But it really felt like I was sometimes talking to, and like, all love to my ex-therapist, but like, I felt like I was talking to a brick wall sometimes because I was trying to out-logic her
Yeah.
all the time, and she couldn't have any rebuttals.
Yeah.
Whereas now, my therapist is very like, okay, and what if, like, and what if you were 9 months pregnant? Then I
Yep.
guess, we'll see you
Let's
after.
pick a name.
Yeah,
Yeah.
literally,
Right.
literally.
Yeah.
So that has like, it's been a drastic change. And at first I was like, how is this going to help me? Like, how is this going to be a therapy that's right for me? And then it did work.
Mhm.
And that was like the miraculous thing. But yeah, the what if thing, I hate it.
Mhm. What's your life like now, being able to just accept a thought or image or urge that pops into your head, being like, all right, versus everything must have attention paid to it?
I have a lot more time on my hands
Yeah.
now. I have a lot
I'll
more-
give you that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I have
Yeah.
way more time on my
Mhm.
hands. No, I'm genuinely a much, much, much calmer person. And like,
Mhm.
everybody in my life has said that, which sounds so funny because when people do ask like, what is ERP therapy like? And I do actually explain it to them. Like, I was literally, when I was recording a podcast with my friend today, and like, we were on the roof, and I was like, yeah, my therapist said to sometimes sing your obsessions or your intrusive thoughts like in a nursery rhyme.
Oh, yeah.
And so like, I am gonna kill my mom, kill my mom, kill my mom. Like, and he was like, that's what you're doing in therapy. And I was like, yeah, and it works. And like,
Mhm.
that's nuts. And so like, when I do explain to people what ERP therapy can be to the average person, like you said, it is a different way of thinking and a different logic. And so while I am, I am so much more of a calmer person now that I have my like control back. I don't even want to say control back because I don't even know if I ever really had it in the first place. Like, I don't think I was ever fully in control of my life because OCD always took like the front seat, like the
Yeah.
driver's seat, or like a really annoying passenger princess. And so I totally feel like I have been much, much more of a calmer person. I'm much more independent. I was able to move out of my family's house after I got treatment for OCD. I genuinely was like not in a place to like
Sure.
live on my own. I don't even think that my family, even though I was of age, but my family would not have like even approved of me going off to live on my own in a different city, going off to live in Philadelphia, like being in my own apartment, being able to have control over my life. Like, I just feel, first of all, like I feel in control of my career. I feel in control of my life, but not so much in the aspect like I am okay with the unexpected.
Yeah.
Not always. I mean, I still definitely have moments
Of course.
of
Of course.
really, really hard times, but it has been a complete 180 of how much calmer I am, genuinely.
I always like to talk to people. I say control's an illusion.
Yeah.
Right. The OCD lies to you and says you can have complete control if
Yeah.
you just do enough compulsions. But of course, were you ever able to do enough compulsions?
No, and like that, regardless of what I did, nothing was enough.
Yeah.
I never felt like, I never felt better
Right.
after any of my compulsions or my moments or my bouts or my episodes. Like, I can't name a single time that I felt better. And like,
Mhm.
that's why I write my scripts in therapy and like have to go back to them, and I have to remind myself, like, you have never felt better doing one of, your many compulsions. It never got to a point where I was grateful that I did that thing,
Yeah.
whatever it may be.
And I love the nursery rhyme you said.
Yeah.
I have a card in my wallet. I'm happy to show you after this. It says, "I hope my parents die tonight. Please
Nice.
God." There's a 666 on it as well, which I've
Nice.
carried in there for 18 years. I was working with someone once who was afraid if they had a negative thought about their parents, they'd be dead by the end of the day. I said, well, let me see if I can kill my parents.
Right.
And 18 years later, they're still alive. Hi, mom and dad. And they know it's in there and they laugh about it. Right?
Yeah.
So but it is amazing, I think, for some people that how again, going back to it feels so real,
Mm.
how real that actually feels, that you are the responsible person out of all 8.5 billion people in the world. It's your fault.
Yeah. I truly I could read the news and see something come up. Something bad could happen to a celebrity, and somehow I feel like I was responsible for that. Me having
Yeah.
no connection to that celebrity, no connection whatsoever. I still struggle with that to this day, of people close in my life where I feel this grand sense of responsibility, especially with the people around me. If
Yeah.
there's any inconvenience or sadness, emotions and feelings, horrible. Like, I'm horrible with them because I feel like I'm responsible for all of that. I feel like I'm responsible for everyone's happiness. I feel like I'm responsible for anyone's sadness or anger around me. Like, there was this running joke with me and all my friends, like, I would constantly just ask people, like, "Are you mad at me? Are you mad at me? Are you
Mhm.
mad at me?" And nobody knew at the time, like, that was me checking.
Totally a compulsion.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
But now I don't ask any. I try not to ask anymore. I
Mhm.
mean, I still slip up, and I definitely do have moments of me asking.
Sure.
But
Mhm.
luckily I have people around me who now know that they're not supposed to reassure me and give me the responses. Like, I think you already know the answer to that, which I hate them all for doing that. I mean, I love them,
You
but
love that.
I love them, and my therapist loves them too.
Yes.
And she's like, okay, they're great people,
Yeah.
but God, is it frustrating. But
I've also seen kind of the opposite, the I'm sorry compulsion.
yeah,
We're
yeah.
saying, oh, sorry, just I'm sorry.
hmm
That comes through for a lot of people as well.
Absolutely. I now catch that with other people, and I'm
Mhm.
like, what are you apologizing? But I can't even be upset because I was like, this was me for many, many, many years of my life. Like, I completely understand what it's like to feel literally the weight of the world's shoulders on your shoulders.
What a fascinating condition. And
I know.
by that I mean jerky and awful and
Yeah.
horrible, but that it is so very convincing,
Yeah.
right? And I'm going to go back to what you talked about, like with your family. There was never going to be enough logic
hmm
from your family or your friends for you to be have the light bulb moment of,
Yep.
oh, you're right, okay, right?
Right.
It's more on the acceptance of, yeah, whatever. How has your life, I'm going to assume, improved,
hmm
but I'll ask it anyway. How has your life improved by just being able to accept the fact that your brain can go anywhere and that's all right?
Yeah. I feel like, if anything, those thoughts have lessened so much.
Sure.
Like the horrible thoughts of the what if, I feel like they are now a passing moment. I mean, I used to practice like mindfulness and stuff. Like, I took a yoga class in like high school, and I was like, I love mindfulness, but I could never practice it properly because I'm like, what do you mean that thought can just pass you by? And
Yeah.
so um it's amazing how much I see like improvement within myself. And also, like, I'm very proud of myself for situations will come up, and I'm like, I would not be able to handle this a few years ago. Like, I think that this would have truly sent me into a spiral a few
Mhm.
years ago had this have happened. But now I'm like, wow, I really do have the tools that I am able to just let this pass by. Bad news doesn't feel as bad anymore.
Yeah.
And um other people's negative emotions don't feel like the end of the world anymore. And bad days don't feel like a sign anymore. Like, that was a really hard thing for me, was that my days were led by signs.
Yeah.
If I saw too many signs, it felt like a bad thing, but if I saw no signs, that was also a bad thing.
Yeah.
And so my days were just controlled by that. And so I feel finally like I am living a life of what other people may seem as like normalcy, where I can go about my days without feeling like the universe is constantly talking to me, or God is always talking to me, or giving me signs of, or that I am, you know, meant to protect the world of these horrible disasters coming, or things
Yeah.
I should know that I just don't know. And so um it's been like night and day for me how much things have improved.
So I want to go to the work you do online.
hmm
So important. And again, thank you for all of it, because I think that the more we put it out there, the more we destigmatize this, the better. It was a risk. You talked
Yeah.
about for a while there's no way you're putting this out there, and then you saw there wasn't enough out there. So walk me through those first few videos where you decided, all right, I'm going to take the chance.
Yeah.
And what was the response like from people for doing that?
People are so kind and positive, and like I've been so lucky that my audience has been so supportive, whether it's online or people that I meet in real life who have watched my videos. I'm very lucky for that. The negative comments, they don't, I feel like I've had to grow a thick skin while being on the internet. There's sometimes still things that really hurt and affect me. But, in the beginning, coming forward and talking about having OCD, there were, of course, comments of like, no, you don't,
Yeah.
just, or like, turn to religion and
Yeah.
that'll help you. Or, everybody has some sort of mental illness these days. Like, people love that comment. And it's like,
Oh, I have OCD too.
yes,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
That one definitely. But for the most part, I feel like people have been very kind. I was really scared of if I opened up about the things that I had specific obsessions about, that people would try and use that against me. And I'm really grateful personally that I waited a little while until I talked about specific things. Like, I was not ready. My first video, I don't think I mentioned that I was constantly worried about being pregnant. Worried is an understatement, but like convinced that I was pregnant. I'm happy that I did not mention that, because as time has gone on and I'm a little bit more comfortable talking about that in my videos now, and sharing like that was a really big theme in my life. I will get sometimes comments of people just being like making pregnancy jokes with me, and I know they are intended to be a joke, and I know they probably don't suffer with OCD, so they don't see how that could really affect someone, and it's like unwarranted exposure therapy.
Yeah.
But I'm happy that I waited, because I was not ready. If I got those comments in the beginning, I wouldn't be ready to like handle things like that. And so I've had to like kind of find a line where I respect myself and my personal and private life, and that I'm able to not allow everybody in completely, because there are some things that I just want to stay between my therapist and I, and then there's other things that I am comfortable sharing, and I do feel like I'm in a place that I can finally talk about them, that they might help somebody else. But the unfortunate truth of it is there are going to be people out there who do not take OCD seriously or do not understand it, and will maybe try and use these kind of things like against you, and like make jokes. And it is what it is. Like, I love jokes. I think they're great, but I've like drawn a boundary and like a line. And I was like, that's not funny. Like I wouldn't do that to anybody else. And like, if I am vulnerable enough to open about something that was so personal to me, like, I would not like to receive those kind of comments. The same way that you probably wouldn't like make comments in my comment section. I mean, granted, there definitely have been people, but like, you wouldn't make a comment saying like, yeah, you probably are going to be the reason that your mom dies. Like, you wouldn't do that to somebody else. You shouldn't probably do that about other people's obsessions if they were to open up about them.
Right.
So, I remember like even, many years ago, I remember seeing like a clip of like Hi Mandel, like about people going and touching him, even though he intentionally has talked about him not wanting that, but people think that it's funny and to push people's boundaries and buttons. And I mean, luckily nothing of that, line has not been crossed for me, but I mean, it can happen.
Sure.
But for the most part, the grand majority of people have been extremely kind and supportive and sweet, and talked about their own experiences, or told me that because of my videos, they have sought out to get a diagnosis or even like seek out therapy, which is ultimately what I wanted. Like, I wanted people to feel comfortable enough to the point where they can go get treatment, because they probably didn't even know that they were going through this themselves, because they were so embarrassed to even bring this up to anybody around them.
Yeah. The other part with OCD is most people make an assumption that you can see it.
Yeah.
But you've had mental compulsions. Maybe there's people even watching today like, what?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear the personal side of OCD in the mental side of it, where no one else might know that you're doing a compulsion.
Yeah. No, people think that, like you said, compulsions are just physical a lot of times, like whether that be washing your hands or checking the light switch, which is why I thought like, I don't have OCD. I was like, I check if the door is locked, but I'm not checking over and over and
Yeah.
over again. And I don't do things in numbers. Like people often associate OCD that it has to be where somebody associates things with numbers. It has to
Yeah.
be 3 times or 5 times or 10, whatever it may be. And I was like, yeah, I can't have OCD because I don't do any of those things. Like I am concerned about the stove being on, but not to the grand extent that I am going and touching the knob many times. I will say, like, when I'm very high stress, I do notice that when I'm high stress, I do find that my OCD gets worse. And when my OCD gets worse, I do find that I have more physical compulsions
Okay.
for myself personally. But for the most part, mine are just this mental review and this constant checking within myself in my head or replaying scenarios in my head to try and see what actually happened. And it's exhausting because
Yeah.
you would think that, oh, well, if it's all mental, it has taken, it's almost like when I get into the state of this worry, it's almost like I have this mental paralysis for the day. Like there's nothing else that I can do except worry about that thing. And I remember in when I in CBT when I was doing the criteria for OCD, and one of the questions was like, "How long do you think this is taking of your day?" And I'm like, "I'm doing this most hours of the day,
Nonstop. Right.
nonstop. Like
Yeah.
this is taking up majority of my day. Like I cannot do work. I can't do schoolwork. I can't go out. I can't hang out with my friends because of this." But then, there are times where I am super busy and I have to be out or I have to be doing, physical things outside or be with friends. And I'm like, oh, it's less. Like it's maybe not as bad. And sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. And then I'm like, did I fake it? That's another big one for me is I think I faked my OCD. Like I'm like, I duped everybody. I tricked everybody. Like, how funny am I? Like I faked having OCD and now I'm on like the NOCD podcast and I'm like,
Yeah. Now I
I
have to end the
I
podcast
know.
because you're a big liar.
I'm like,
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
a scammer.
Exactly.
I duped everyone. I was like, I'm deceiving everyone.
Mhm.
I'm paying, so much to go visit doctors and medication and therapy, and I don't even have it. Like, that's nuts that I was even able to do that. And that's all mental. That's all mental
Yeah.
review that I'm doing for hours and hours on end. It doesn't always have to be physical, which is like a huge misconception. And had I known that there was a thing like mental review and mental checking, then maybe I would have known sooner that I have OCD.
Yeah, and I'm glad you went into that so much because you are kind of known for this "I'm a scammer"
Yeah.
idea. So I think that that's so very important
Yeah.
that have you tricked all of us?
Yeah.
Right?
That's what I feel like. A lot of times,
Uh-huh.
I feel like there's oftentimes I feel like my whole career is a scam. I scammed everybody to do my career. Sometimes I genuinely have nightmares that are, and then in present day, like that I don't have a college degree. I like have to check if I
Yeah.
have a college. I feel like I really don't. And so I feel like I am a big lie to everyone around me, but I have just had to get comfortable with the fact of like, maybe I am. Maybe I am a big scammer. I'm really good at it. And like, maybe I'm lying to everyone around me.
Yeah. With existential OCD, it's like,
Yeah.
can you guarantee that this is not a simulation?
Yeah.
I say, no, it might be. I
Yeah.
don't, I think someone worked out the probability. It's around 12% or something like
Oh,
that
wow.
chance that this is all a simulation. I saw that once, but I thought it
Nice.
was fascinating. I was like, yeah, we really cannot get the answers that OCD wants us to have.
No. My therapist, she even, that was something that I struggled with for a period of time, like feeling like things that I wasn't in real life or that I was in a dream state.
Yeah.
My therapist was like, okay, well, dream you probably still has to eat, and dream you probably
Yeah.
still has to do whatever you need to do.
Go to the bathroom.
Yeah, literally.
You know,
So like
yeah,
might as
right.
well just like live them out.
Yeah.
And it helped. Like that that really genuinely helped.
That's awesome. Before we wrap up, what is your advice to people watching who are on the cusp? They're like, what do I do? Should I take the risk, do the plunge on this?
Yeah.
What do you want to say to them?
First of all, getting a diagnosis or seeking a diagnosis or meeting with, specialists to try and get one, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. And whatever the outcome is, the outcome is. Nothing negative happens. I felt a lot of shame like going to doctors and different therapists. I felt like I was wasting their time. And until I realized like I have every right to be there as everyone else, I that gave me a big push. And also, like, I was like, what's the harm? Like, what is the harm in doing any of this? On top of that, starting treatment, I was so scared. Like, I have considered many times before starting treatment, I was like, what if this isn't right for me? What if I am gonna regress? What if just so many what ifs.
Yeah.
Time is gonna pass anyway. So,
Mhm.
you know, people are like, well, whether it's medication or something like that, medication, it takes so many months for, things to kick in and for you to get on the dose when you need to. Well, time is going to pass anyway.
Yeah.
And therapy, it takes so many months to like finally get in the groove and feel comfortable to find the right therapist or like actually get the treatment that you need or actually see results. Well, time is going to pass anyway. Like
Yeah.
it's going to go by regardless. So in the meantime, I might as well try and better myself. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I mean, I spent, I think, a year in CBT that didn't end up, being the best thing for me. But I learned a lot of lessons through it. Like,
Mhm.
that wasn't for me. That was a big lesson. Like,
Yeah.
now I know.
Yeah.
And I also got like the first person. My therapist in CBT was the first person to ever listen to me and believe and give me the diagnosis of OCD. And so without that, I don't regret that at all. And so I think going through with it has been so important, and also just hearing the people around me be like, you have really, not only do I notice in myself, I notice in myself how much I've improved and changed and I'm a happier person, and just the trajectory of my life over the last few years has gotten just so much more positive, but everybody else in my life can see it too. And I think that's really important. I'm a better daughter because of it. I'm a better girlfriend because of it. I'm a better friend because of it. I'm a better overall happier person because of it. And I think I owe that to myself. And so the time is going to pass anyway. So if you have the chance and opportunity to get help, then what is the harm in trying?
And then you can live the life you want
Yeah.
and not the life OCD wants you to live.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Well, I'm proud of you
Thank
for the
you.
work you've done. Really, I mean
Thank
that
you.
very sincerely.
I
And
appreciate it.
and a thank you, because the community only benefits from more information being out there and putting a face to it
Mhm.
and showing that you do live the life you want to live.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here today,
Thank
Nicole.
you. Thank you very much.
And thank all of you for joining us today on the Get to Know OCD podcast. If you're interested in watching more, you can subscribe to the NOCD YouTube channel. And if you're looking for help for OCD or related conditions, check us out at NOCD.com. We'll see you again on another episode of the Get to Know OCD podcast. Talk to you soon.